there, Fernando, my ever-present, ever-patient companion. I just finished reading a couple of passages about genre sorting. Like, how do you decide what belongs to what genre? And passage A was about Borges' view that it's the reader that does it. The way the reader reads the text determines what genre it belongs to. Passage B says, it's the writer that does it, and the writer does it in anticipation of what the reader, in anticipation of the way that the reader will read the text. So, Borges in line 17 imagines that the participation is not extrinsic, but is essential. What unites them is the way the works are read. In passage B, the texts, I'm in line 33, the texts that are most central to a genre, the ones that kind of define the genre, are those texts that were written to exploit a protocol. So they were written in anticipation of the way the reader reads. All right. Both passages are concerned with answering which of the following questions. How do you decide what genre a work belongs to? There's your answer choice C. They would both agree that what? For answer choice E, we know that they'd agree that you can have similar plots, characters, and settings and yet have different genres because both of them say it. What unites the works is the way I'm in line 20, the way the works are read rather than any set of elements found within the works. So you can have two works that are the same and just read them differently. Line 34 saying the same thing. It's the texts that were written to exploit, not the texts that were written with certain elements in mind. And notice how that dovetails so neatly with the central point of each passage. Something worth noting, right? For 15, the stance expressed by the author of passage A. I mean, you want to know what complete agreement looks like? This is what complete agreement looks like. I present you with the views of Jorge Luis Borges without comment, without complaint, without any kind of commentary, just putting them out there. That is complete agreement. And I don't know if you wanted to moderate that view in some, but what would reluctant acceptance, what would that even look like? Oh, I hate to admit it, Jorge Luis Borges. But I guess you're right. That's stupid. No author's ever said anything like that. You either accept it or you don't. Why would you be reluctant to accept it? Come on. Question 16. True about the argumentative structure. How do we see A moving from the specific to the general? A starts with the title of a lecture. That's as specific as you can get. And then by the end, we're talking about what unites works belonging to the same genre. We have suddenly ballooned out in this very general discussion. Passage B, on the other hand, starts by defining genres of fiction, just as general as passage A ended. And by the end of passage B, we're talking specifically about one protocol used in reading one type of writing, poetry. So, they have a funnel, like two facing funnels. A starts like this. B goes like this. 17, the author of B would agree with which of the following. For answer choice B, for passage B, we talked about at the beginning of this that for passage B, it's what the writer does, right? It's not what the reader thinks. It's what the writer does that places in a genre. But it's not just what the writer does in a vacuum. It is what the writer does in anticipation of the way the reader will read. So for B, readers' expectations are not essential. That's false. The expectations are essential because the reader's expectations form the way the writer writes in order to exploit the reading protocol she expects them to use. So while the reader's expectations and the reader's experience is absolutely essential to passage A, it defines the genre in passage A. In passage E, the reader's expectations are still important because the reader's expectations are the very thing that the writer exploits when determining what genre she's writing in. A, on the other hand, absolutely true. Fictional works that were not written to exploit the reading protocol of a particular genre are sometimes borderline cases. And we know that because there are always borderline cases, and the ones at the core are the ones that were written to exploit. So the ones that weren't written to exploit are going to be in that mass of, that diaphanous mass of works that are at the borders, not centrally located. All right, for 18, B would agree with what? Oh, not just B, but Borges and B. By the way, you want to talk about complete agreement? Notice that the authors of the test writers, don't even bother to ascribe this agreement to the author of passage A. They just Borges. Passage A is Borges' voice. Borges and B would agree with which of the following? I'll point you to line 7. He or she might read any narrative as a detective story. Any narrative? Like even science fiction? Yes. Line 32, we are free to read any text by any... Wait, you could read a science fiction as if it were detective? Yes. Both passages say it in literal, actual, explicit words. That's how we know they agree about it. And finally, 19, the principle that underlies B. The principle that underlies B is that the writer determines the genre by anticipating the protocol that the reader will use, the framework that the reader will use. And how can we apply that to the view of detective fiction? And detective fiction, according to Borges, is about the way the reader reads. And so stories in the genre of detective fiction use rhetorical figures designed to encourage readers' suspicions. Well, what did Borges say about detective fictions? Specifically, in line 5, this special type of reader confronts literature with incredulity and suspicions. So we have this loop now, right? Where passage B says the author anticipates the reading protocol. Passage A says the reader supplies the framework. And if you want to be specific about detective stories, it would be a writer encouraging, anticipating that suspicious framework and writing in such a way as to exploit it. And that's what you have in answer choice C. And that's the A-B set.